Canada had a pretty good showing at the Olympics. I'm just wondering what you think that does to public sentiment for a potential bid in 2026.
You know, obviously people are very excited about the Olympics right now, particularly after the tremendous showing of Team Canada at Pyeongchang. It's actually one of the reasons why I didn't want to do a ton of public engagement during the Olympics, because I'd like cooler heads to prevail as we continue to have this discussion.
So is there the desire to maybe cool it off a bit, before the discussions continue?
I'd like to, but we don't have that much time. So council really does have to make a decision in order to provide the Canadian Olympic Committee with information on whether we're serious about this late this spring, early this summer. So we've got to move quickly at this point.
And how do you ensure that the decisions are made based on evidence as opposed to, warm, fuzzy emotions?
Good news is I am always based on evidence, and that's what we have to continue to do.
Do you know what the public engagement process is going to look like?
I don't, but we should have some detail on that sometime next week or the week after.
Has there been anything more from the provincial or federal governments about funding commitments at all? When was that deadline for the city that you guys were hoping to hear from both?
Yeah, the deadline was towards the end of January. Both governments came back and said that they would be making their decisions in February. So stay tuned. There should be some news on that very soon.
Any recent talk with the Flames?
No, nothing.
I asked because Seattle begins their season ticket drive later this week, and private money was the big pusher in getting that deal done. Would the city be open to working directly with a private entity rather than the Flames in Six-Day Arena?
Yeah, absolutely. We're open to anything on this. And really what we've seen over the last several months, as you well know, because you know it better than I do, is that we've had a deal in Seattle, which is 100% private money. We've had a deal in Long Island, which is 100% private money. And most recently, we've had the owner of the Ottawa Senators suggesting he doesn't want any public money. So clearly, there is a universe of options out there that are worth exploring.
Are we discussing any of those universe of options with the
No.
Will CMLC be taking over the file on the city's behalf?
What do you mean take over the file?
In terms of talking with the Flames about?
Well, again, I'll reiterate this. This is sort of an odd line of questioning. The city continues to be at the table. We never left the table. It's up to other people to call and suggest that they're willing to talk.
Have they called?
Nope.
Is necessarily the clock ticking on the Olympics, does that have any impact on the discussions from your side?
Not at all. It would be helpful to figure out what we're doing on the one file for the other one. But that said, the Olympic group has very clearly shown that you don't need two arenas in order to do the arena. There's very few cities in the world that would have two 20,000 seat arenas that would be interested in hosting a Winter Olympics. So it's certainly possible to do without. It certainly would be nice to do with. So,
can you clear up the
budget
timeline on the Olympics? One of your councillors is retweeting a journalist saying the city has to make a decision by the end of March to bid, and that's not the case.
No. The Canadian Olympic Committee will be making a decision on whether or not to push forth a Canadian bid in June, after that, by the end of June, and after that, the IOC itself has to invite cities to bid, and that will happen in October.
Have you spoken to Mayor Iveson yet about...
Sorry, go ahead.
It's the end of March for the dialogue stage, right?
Yeah, you have to sort of send a letter saying we're still chatting, but that's not a big deal.
Have you spoken with Mayor Iveson yet about what Edmonton could do to complement a Calgary Olympic bid?
I have.
And?
I have.
Can you share?
No. Those discussions remain ongoing.
So when is council again have to make a decision on whether to bid or not?
Well, we have a number of off-ramps, a number of opportunities to go in and go out. But I think that rather than pull this out forever, council really should send an indication of what it thinks by the end of June, which means by the end of June, we really should have an idea of what the finances look like and what the commitment from the federal and provincial governments would be.
So given budget day in Ottawa, what are you hoping to see in that budget?
I hope that we will continue to see investments in infrastructure across the country, but particularly a real acknowledgement that Alberta remains unique in our fragile economic recovery. You know, the Canadian economy is really firing on all cylinders right now. We're hearing the Bank of Canada talk about increasing interest rates, and it's important for the federal government to recognize that Alberta has not been part of that firing on all cylinders yet. And so I would really love to see a commitment either in the budget or going on after the budget from the federal government that it really is going to focus a lot of its economic development activity as well as its foreign direct investment promotion on Alberta. I was disappointed, along with many, that the supercluster announcement was made 2 weeks ago involved economic development investment from the federal government in 9 out of 10 provinces. The only one that didn't receive significant investment was Alberta, and I think that was a big mistake.
In response to, you talked this morning about the money that for doing flood mitigation. You had concerns that, hey, this is not, it's one thing about putting in the train and stuff like that, but this is something that needs to be done. Can you talk about that?
Thanks. You know, protecting Calgary from future flooding remains our number one investment priority, because if we lose downtown Calgary for 6 months, we lose the economy. It's incredibly important that we work on this, and I'm really heartened that the provincial and federal governments have made real commitments to the Springbank Reservoir, the Springbank Dry Dam, I should say, and I'm confident that that project will move forward, and that project should move forward. I'm confident that our projects within the city, what I call brute force mitigation, building berms, armoring the riverbank, and so on, will also move forward. I am concerned that we haven't yet had a funding commitment from anyone for upstream mitigation on the Bow River. That's a very expensive item, and it has to get done.
Now, support animals, let's get into whether
Oh my
hens
gosh.
should be a support animal. Your thoughts on this motion coming up this afternoon?
I don't really know enough about how support animals work and how that really, what's a nice way of saying this? I'm not really sure about how that works and how effective they are for people. That said, it's not my job to make it up. I generally believe that the city should stay out of people's lives up to the point where it's really interfering with other people's enjoyment. You know, I supported a pilot project to have hens in backyards. That failed at council, but if people are using these animals and it's helping them, then who am I to say no?
What do you think about having academic references in those?
I love it.
Back at the Olympics again, I'm wondering whether there was an editorial on the weekend about whether the Calgary bid they should do it for the next 2 Winter Games. They'd be more efficient, or what do you think about that?
You know, we asked that question very specifically of the leadership and the decision makers at the IOC, and the answer we got was they are not contemplating awarding 2 bids at the same time, but if a weird circumstance like with Los Angeles and Paris were to come up, they would not close the door to it. So it was a kind of neither yes, neither no question, and if we choose to move forward, those are conversations we'd be willing to have.
Can I ask you a question en français?
Oui.
À quoi vous vous attendez demain dans le budget fédéral déposé à Ottawa?
Pour moi, c'est très, très important que le gouvernement du Canada que le gouvernement du Canada connaisse qu'il y a des problèmes ici à Alberta avec notre recovery économique. C'est aussi très, très difficile pour nous parce que nous n'avons pas l'amélioration des jobs ici. Et donc, c'est très, très important pour moi que le gouvernement fédéral a vraiment parlé de la création des jobs ici.
Mais quelles sont les priorités? L'infrastructure?
Vraiment, c'est les priorités des infrastructures comme toujours, mais aussi de développement économique régional ici en Alberta.
Et vous revenez de Pyeongchang. Est-ce que je peux avoir peut-être votre impression sur les Jeux qui viennent de se terminer, mais aussi où se positionne la ville de Calgary maintenant?
Les gens de Pyeongchang ont fait un grand job et félicitations aux eux pour ce qu'ils ont fait. Et pour nous, on continue la discussion ici. Megan, what can I do for you?
Can I get you to respond a little bit to what your concerns were around the whole water bill?
Sure. In fact, I wasn't going to vote for this because I think that the report was a little bit unclear, so I was happy to get the answers we got, which is essentially, look, the cost of this, just like the cost of shoplifting and spoilage in a grocery store, will just be absorbed in the whole system, and it's frankly not that much in a very big utility, and I think that makes sense. Rather than go after people for these overages, even if they were unintentional or they weren't their faults, just absorbing that cost through the water utility, I think that makes a ton of sense. Because even if people did in fact, and in most cases they did, have an inadvertent leak, it's not your fault. And if you fix it when you're alerted to it, as I said back in August, we should forgive you that.
Now, on February 14th, at committee, people from Water Resources said that this would be 30, 40 cents a month, tacked onto everybody's bills in the city. Today they backed off of that and said that this will just be incorporated in their rate recommendation. What steps can you do or take to make sure that that figure isn't inflated by that?
I'll keep asking those questions. I think that I wasn't there at committee, but I think that they misspoke a little bit at committee. I think what they were attempting to say was, look, this is a cost of about $1.5 million that'll be absorbed across the whole system in everyone's bills. And they were just trying to give you a sense of how big that number was. And I think the way it came out is everyone's bill's going up by this much, but in fact that cost is in the system now.
But they're not saying bills won't go up.
Well, bills will likely go up regardless because the cost of water servicing is going up a little bit, though we've frozen them in the last couple of years. They will likely go up anyway, but it won't be because of this.
So are you hoping for an answer to those questions?
Yeah, we'll just make sure when we get to the utility rate setting in the fall, as we always do, that we ask for a good breakdown.
Irving?
Thank you.
Can we talk about the parental leave?
Oh, sure.
motion?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't also think that men can be of childbearing anything.
I think men are always of childbearing age if they've made it past.
I feel like the bearing is
they
the
can
wrong.
take parental leave.
That's more I.
There seem to be some members of council weren't very happy with Councillor Farkas's comments. What are your thoughts?
You know, I just think that it is important for us to be as thoughtful as we can when we think about the kind of people who want to enter politics. It's really tempting in this job to translate everything to your own personal circumstances, where you are in terms of your family life cycle, where you are in terms of your ability to have care at home to look after your children, where you are in terms of your thoughts on your own career. And you can't make policy like that. If you believe that public life is something that should be open to everyone, then you have to systematically remove barriers that keep everyone from participating.
What do you think about the idea of finding a system of proxy voting? You may not have to be in the room to actually vote.
Well, I don't like letting someone else vote. However, I do think that the Municipal Government Act and our new procedure bylaw do allow for people to call into meetings or to participate remotely. We've never done it, but I think it's certainly something we could look at.
Do you think that it's worth looking at what the province says? We were talking before with Jody about, Stephanie McLean, the Minister of Status Women, had her baby right in the legislature. I mean, are there some lessons to be learned from just even other orders of government?
Yeah, absolutely. Other orders of government, other governments. We'll get this one right. I think there's lots we can do. I remember one day, the only one who's had a baby since I've been on council is Councillor Carra. And one day he did bring baby Vance in to the council chamber for a transition point between childcare. And I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was a great symbol of a dad having his baby there, and Vance was certainly being very well behaved. And some members of council at the time kind of objected to it. So having that policy in place, I think, makes a lot of sense.
We do some research. I know in Saskatoon, one of their aldermen or city councillors there had brought her child into the council chambers.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of that, frankly, to show that you can incorporate this into your own lives. And, we think about it as a women's issue. It's an issue for men and for women. But it is worth noting that in Saskatoon, they have a majority female council now. We continue to have some of the lowest rates of female participation in city council in decades, and anything we can do to remove those barriers is a good thing.